So today we're going to continue this conversation that we've been having on reincarnation. And I want to kind of go based on last week into the next step. So we spoke about the idea of the whole. And though the soul keeps on dividing and subdividing itself, still, in each incarnation, the soul retains integral wholeness. It retains a sense of completion. Not only is the soul complete and all comprehensive with all of the 613 energy forces as it had in the first incarnation. We spoke about that, the 248 and 365. But subsequently, in each incarnation, the soul remains perfect. It remains whole. It remains complete as it was in all of the previous embodiments. And even after the first, we'll call that the first possessor, the first body that possesses the soul passes away, and the elements of soul that became exclusive to that person, as we spoke about last week, only the remainder of the soul reincarnates. And that remainder, you think, oh, that remainder is just a piece of the soul. No, it's not a piece of the soul. It's the complete soul. That remainder is so there's a whole. Within that whole, there's unique elements that are going to be unique to your soul. And then the remainder, which looks like it's not the whole, is actually a new whole. It's still a whole. Think of the soul like this. I was thinking of how can I explain this to you? Because you're like, what the heck is he talking about? So here's the best example I can give you. Think of the soul in terms of a hologram, where the part is like the whole, and the whole is present within each part. Every pixel mirroring the total picture. Right? The hologram is made up of many little pieces, many little parts. But each of those parts is a whole. So let's go Kabbalistic for a moment. As the collective spirit of Adam contains 613 soul energies, like we spoke about before, the same is true with every individual consciousness that stems from Adam's soul. It contains 613 aspects. The micro or the part is like the macro, the whole. Each part is an individual whole. So each specific soul energy can be further divided into 613 aspects. And they, in turn, into another 613. It's kind of like particles, like atoms, like molecules. This idea is a dynamic referred to as inter-inclusion, where each part of a larger structure actually contains the whole structure just in miniature within itself. Every single part has the whole thing. The core of the soul is completely one with the infinite, no matter how often the infinity is divided, it still remains infinite. You can divide infinity all you want. It's not going to make it any less infinite. Every slice, so to speak, every slice of infinity is infinite because infinity can't be divided. So when you grasp a small parcel of infinity, you grasp all of infinity, the totality of infinity. And regardless of how often the soul is divided or how often the soul is subdivided, it's going to always retain its signature shape and form as the general root soul. It's going to forever encompass all 613 branches of a single tree, as we spoke about last week. So practically, the fact that our personality, that our primal soul connection is the attribute of, let's say, kindness, doesn't necessarily mean that we're lacking in all other areas of life. It just means that for us, for the kindness person, kindness is the center of our being. It's the foundation, the root cause from which everything else in life flows. The multiple, multidimensional aspects of our soul are channeled and funneled through our individuality, through our uniqueness. And within that is our soul connection of kindness. Most, I don't like to say all, but most people go through life. And as they go through life, they succeed in tapping into at least one aspect of their soul. It seems that there's always one mitzvah, one deed that is essential, that's vital to each and every person. There's always some positive, life-affirming force, like a raison d'etre, that compels the human being to carry on, to move forward through life. The individualized spark of the soul that a person activates in this life through their one unique mitzvah, that's what gains them their place in the world to come in Gan Eden and Eden. And so it's part of their soul that remains throughout their life and then throughout their afterlife. It's the uniqueness of self that will journey onwards for eternity. That unique spark, that unique part of us. Once the soul, in its entirety, in its subdivisions, in its divisions, has been elevated, has been activated, has been articulated, the soul will then cease to return into into this world, into the earthly realm of existence. The soul is going to stop reincarnating. Now, how long this process of elevation takes, whether it's in one lifetime or it's in hundreds of lifetimes, essentially depends on the individual that possesses the soul and what that individual does with it. There's really no limit or set amount of times that a soul can descend into this world. So as long as even the slightest measure of development is being achieved during the incarnation of which the soul comes into this world. When no perfection or elevation has occurred in a lifetime, the soul will only descend another 2 times. It has 3 tries. If no perfection or elevation is reached in the subsequent 2 lifetimes, that distinct soul will never reincarnate into another human being again. It only has 3 tries. If there's 3 times it comes into this world and there's not one bit of elevation during the lifetime, it just kind of becomes a dim puff. But even a slight elevation is achieved, then every subsequent incarnation, the soul will incarnate indefinitely as long as there's work to do and the work is being done and there are lives to lead. We have a beautiful passage that we say in our morning prayers. It comes from the Talmud. It's actually in our Talmud class. We're about to talk about this piece. And it says, "The soul that you have given me is pure." It's a beautiful passage. The soul you have given me, we say to God in the morning, the soul you have given me is pure. This passage is intended to be taken quite literally. Each soul that comes down into this world is pure. It's immaculate. It's unsoiled from any previous deeds or any past incarnations. For the most part, each person begins life with a clean slate. It's why we don't remember anything from before. We are born innocent, neither good nor bad, neither holy or evil, simply innocent, with the innate ability to choose our path. With regards to the spark of soul that belongs exclusively to us, to our individual incarnation, this incarnation is considered the very first one. For that unique spark, it's the very first time it's in this world. It's the first time that these particular energies are combined into this proportion. The recipe is different for each one of us in each incarnation. Each and every time is different, making up this unique soul, our unique soul, articulating ourselves in this particular matter, in this novel matter. So every single time we're in this world, because each and every element within us is a complete whole unto itself, every time we're here, it's a different set of complete wholes that are combined. And that combination creates our unique incarnation, our unique soul, our unique time in this world. Questions?
Is that why we don't remember other incarnations? Because everything's wiped clean.
Correct.
And we start over. So we don't remember. So how do we know that we're working on the right lessons or the new lessons that we're supposed to be improving ourselves if we don't remember the other or the past?
Because we're working. As long as we're working, we're doing a good job. The problem is when we just, and some people unfortunately do this, we reduce ourselves to the animal kingdom. We just live our entire life based on instinct. Eat, drink, sleep. Everything is just instinct. That's the problem. But if we're doing something more than that, automatically we're doing the right thing.
From the moment you started talking about the analogy of the hologram is sort of where you lost me. I don't know about anybody else, but my mind went to a worm. I don't know why, because I think someone said that if you cut a worm, they grow back. And that part that was cut also grows back into a full worm. I don't know why my head just went from hologram to worm.
The worm could be a good analogy, but the problem with the worm is that maybe it is a good analogy. The idea that I wanted to express is that each and every particle within us is a whole, all unto itself. It has the 613 elements into every single tiny particle within the soul. So therefore, to say that, oh, well, your soul is let's say your soul is the 57th incarnation of this soul that ever existed. I'm just making a number up. And that means that there's 57 people that live in the world that had the same soul before you. Yes, but it's the same root soul. And they had unique elements that stayed with them. But then what do I have? Do I have 1/57th of the soul now? No, you have the complete soul, because it's a different recipe, different makeup, because each and every element is a whole unto itself. That's essentially what I'm trying to say.
Okay, thanks.
Julianne, please.
Thank you. I was thinking the same thing, but with the idea of the Hydra. I think there's two types of Hydra. I may have got this wrong, but I think there's some kind of real life creature that's a Hydra, which I may have been thinking of the one, but I think it's some maybe a water creature, a creature that lives in water. And the other one, of course, is the mythological Hydra with the 7 heads. But
right,
that was what I was thinking. You know, it copies itself. So I was thinking, is that a metaphor? Because they say, as above, so below. Everything that exists teaches us something. So maybe it exists to tell us there's a spiritual equivalent that does the same thing. And then so I thought maybe that's what the Hydra, maybe the soul does what the Hydra does, or here the worm, but in a spiritual sense.
Right. Yeah, it's very possible. Again, we have to use analogy in our world. The reason why you have to use analogy is because without analogy, we don't understand this. I mean, already we are dealing with ideas that are connected to the infinite. We, as human beings in this world, are always going to be limited to time and space. We can't tap. Even the idea of infinite is not really infinite. We just say infinite has no end. We don't really have a word. If we were infinite, we would have a word for infinite. So because we're limited by time and space, because we have these limitations, we have no choice but to use analogy. So yeah, I think the Hydra is another great analogy. I mean, there's tons of analogies, but the idea is that the whole exists within each individual particle. That's the idea. I want to, please, Joe.
I just have one question. You said, if the soul during incarnation doesn't elevate at all, and that's happens 3 times, it's like, all right, sorry, Charlie, 3 strikes, you're out. And I'm assuming that's something that is judged by the creator, God, whoever, that, okay, you didn't do it, and you're not going back to try. And so that's who judges it, really? Or I'm assuming?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably one of the most sourced ideas that I've presented so far about incarnation. It's from the Zohar. It talks about it in the Tikkun Zohar. It talks about it it's in the Zohar 372b. It's in the Tikkun Zohar I just made some notes here for myself when I was researching. 32. It's in the commentary Ramban and Bereshit 4:1. It's in the Shvile Emuna Nosiv 3. It's in the Chayit Mareches Elikus 10. The Magid Mesharim and the book of Job. The Alshich on Deuteronomy. And also there's a very beautiful piece of this in the Marsha in the Talmud on Shabbat 152b. And the reason why I generally don't in the class give you all my sources, though I write the sources in my notes here as I'm talking about them, is just to give you an idea is that this happens to be very, very well understood. And in those particular commentaries, each and every one of them has a different way that it's judged. So if you want, I mean, we'd have to do like a full analysis of all the different ways that we're judged. If it was important to you, happy to
No, I was just curious. I'd never, I've heard of the concept of reincarnation. I've just not heard that, you get 3 tries and then, this isn't the place for you. So that was interesting.
Most of the commentaries will say that it never really happens. It's just a kind of, very often within Judaism, we use these as kind of barriers, but they never really happen. For example, people have an issue in the Torah, it talks about the death penalty. But then it says in the Talmud that a court that would issue a death penalty twice in 70 years was a faulty court. Like it was just considered a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
But it was almost impossible for that to actually physically happen. And I would say it's similar here, that it's a boundary, but it's almost practically impossible for that to happen. Because it means that person would have to be, that soul would have to be reincarnated 3 times and do nothing in this world.
Right.
So practically it's as you can see, it's virtually impossible.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know one person in this world that's done in their lifetime nothing beyond the animalistic kingdom.
Okay.
I know people who have lived in this world for years as in a vegetative state, in a vegetative state that have done tremendous things.
Okay, so when you say that, do you mean by the people that are surrounding that person?
Yes,
and so therefore
they've been able to inspire people people around them. I mean, just being able to, just inspiring someone around you. I mean, it's such a basic element of humanity that we're talking about.
Okay, so if we're taking that idea, and of somebody who's just like, you just see that they are just working from their animal soul or just doing horrible things, but they're inspiring others to live a good life or live in a different way. So that person that's doing that horrible thing is still advancing their soul.
Yes.
All right. So it's a real non thing. Okay. I get it now.
Yeah. But it's important to have these discussions because we need those boundaries. They need to exist as boundaries, theoretically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess I'm not quite sure what that need is, but
well,
okay.
I mean, the prison needs to exist. No one should ever use it, but it needs to exist as a boundary.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that helps.
If it was possible, I would be interested in a session on that question, because that was one of the things I was wondering. How does one define or differentiate even a slight elevation from a no elevation at all? Because it's important to know what the difference is or what the measurement is. It sounds a very subtle thing.
I'll see if I can. It is very subtle, but I think it's beyond the scope of this particular. It's quite an advanced. I mean, already I'm seeing that a lot of this information is a little advanced for this class. So I want to go through it. I want to be able to, and I'm hoping that you're going to get some kind of something from it. because I think it's important for the conversation. But at the same time, I think if we go too nuanced here, it's going to really lose majority of the room. So, but something to think about in the future.
Oh, thank you. And if I may be so bold as to venture a guess, my guess is that presumably what's elevation for one soul is not elevation for another. In
Yeah.
other words, it's very specific.
That's
to that.
It's exactly what it is.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to just talk about one last little piece before we go into our takeaways today. I want to talk about mending past lives, because I think this really kind of plays into what we spoke about today. In the world of souls, like any other reality, there are rules, and there are also exceptions to those rules. So the rule is that souls do not reincarnate to rectify previous misdeeds or to complete someone else's story. They don't reincarnate to complete another person's story. The reason why a soul reincarnates is to reach their own actualization, to write their own story, to articulate another element of the soul of that particular incarnation. Reincarnation from one human being to the next is for the purpose of self-elevation, not for the purpose of errors from past lives. No one else is going to come back into this world to fix your mistakes. Errors are amended for and fixed in the afterlife, not here in this world. Which means while you're in this world, you have the opportunity to fix whatever you want to fix. And I encourage you to try your best to think of any possible thing that you can fix and fix it, because that's your story, that's your narrative, and that's your unique imprint. If you don't end up fixing it in this world, it'll be fixed in the afterlife, though a lot more painful. But no one else is going to come back here to fix it for you. And no one else is going to fix it for you. If a soul does reincarnate in this world to rectify past wrongs, it'll be within other life forms, not within a human. They may reincarnate as a fish. I'm just saying fish because the Talmud says that the souls of the righteous reincarnate into fish because they have no evil eye, because they can't close their eyes. The exception is that occasionally, souls will reincarnate in human form specifically to make amends for something that was done in a previous life. But this is an exception to the rule. Again, there are rules and there are exceptions to the rules. This is really an exception to the rule. The post-mortem purification mechanism that we call hell or Gehenna has no dominance over a righteous person, over a tzaddik. And it's for this reason that a tzaddik who has erred and passed away and now needs to unburden themselves of negativity has to do so by reincarnating again into a human body and correcting that which is wronged, rather than being purified in the temporary fires of Gehenna, of hell, as most people would. So the only type of person who would have to come back into the world to rectify would be a righteous person, a tzaddik. Tellingly, there are countless stories of bereaved parents who have lost young children and have gone through in search of consolation from the great rabbis, such as the Baal Shem Tov. These rabbis often reveal to them that their child possessed the soul of a righteous person, of a tzaddik. And these rabbis would inform them that their son or their daughter was the soul of a particular righteous person who needed to descend into this world for a short period of time to rectify something done in a previous life. A caveat. I'm not saying this is an answer. It's an unbelievable tragedy, losing someone before their allotted time. It's not an answer, but there are countless stories of people going to righteous people, to tzaddikim, and getting answers that a particular soul had to be in this world for a couple of years for a particular reason. If you're the kind of person who gets solace in this, then maybe it'll bring you solace. But if you're not the kind of person who can agree with that, then don't listen to it. Because nobody should tell anyone how to grieve, and nobody should ever answer for the grieving person. There's no answer for grief. There's support, there's care, there's concern, but there's no answer. That's just my little caveat. So when an actualized soul does reincarnate into another human being, it's usually the soul of a wholly integrated tzaddik, of a wholly integrated righteous person who has only slightly erred and needs to achieve a minimum of soul fixing. But for everyone else, there's afterlife. Questions? Okay, I'm curious. Yes, please, Mar.
It's more of a stepping back question I have, on a deeper, maybe philosophical level. It makes me wonder, in this world, to do good actions, why is it important to understand the afterlife? Do you understand what I mean by that? Like, that part to me, it's very confusing at the moment. Like, why am I'm compelled to come here and listen to this topic, but at the same time, I want to take actions. I want to do good deeds. How does this make a difference? How does this enhance me? This study enhance one as a human being in this world trying to do mitzvot.
I have a lot of answers to that question. I like you to, this part of this is very hard, and I'm going to give you a little bit of the background behind this. It's very, very hard for me because the nature of this class often is that I'm spoon feeding you something that I've done a tremendous amount of research on. And because I'm spoon feeding it to you, you haven't gone through the process that I've had to go through, or that somebody who would be doing research and kind of researching this through the books would have to go through. You're getting it in a kind of very nicely packaged, encapsulated narrative. And so because of that, what I encourage you to do, because I guess your Hebrew is probably not good enough to be able to go through the research, and most of the sources are in Hebrew or Aramaic, is to actually take these questions and question them. I can answer it, but I don't know if I have permission from you to answer it. I think that so often in our education system has taught us that every question gets an answer, but not every question really should have an answer. And sometimes The answer is for us to process the question or process the information. Go back, listen to this recording, and process it, and try to see if you can come to it from yourself. So it's very easy to be a critic. Very easy. You've learned something new. Okay, that's nonsense. It's very hard to say what you're saying, which is very beautiful. What can I learn from it? How can this make me a better person? And that question is not a question that anyone can answer. It's a question that you need to answer through your processing. And this is in any kind of situation, in any kind of learning. It's a question that you need to be able to process and say, this is something that I would like to analyze. If it bothers you, if you're curious about it, that's enough of a reason that you should be processing it, in my opinion. And I know I'm not answering the question. I'm purposely not answering the question.
Yeah, no, I'm always processing and wondering why things are like in the Torah, for example. I mean, one big one that's always been challenging for me and for a lot of people, obviously, is the sacrifice of animals. When you get into these challenging topics, I really respect. I myself taught, for many years, so I understand the preparation and the depth, and that's why I asked you the question, because
Right. No, and
not
I'm
only
not.
not only you probably read Aramaic and Hebrew better than me, but you also went to yeshiva. You studied for many years, and these sort of topics can be complicated, at least for me. I don't know for other people in this class. And I did study quite a bit, but nowhere near what you studied. So my curiosity is, how does it make, you don't have to answer this, by the way, but I am curious how it makes you a better, you know, person, and terms of your interactions with this world. Like, you're so deep into it. Where do you see the differences? Is there a story or something that's personal to you? But you don't have to share it. I respect that if you don't.
I'd like to share. I don't know if I have enough time right now to dive into this, and because of the short time that we have, I'd like to encourage you to ask the question, and maybe over the course of the next weeks, I'll unravel that a little bit. I think I have, over the course of this course, shared, and I often go back to the fact that learning about this helps us be better in this world, and I've showed that over the course of time. Today's class specifically is a little more complicated because it's
Okay.
theoretical. But I encourage you to be curious and to try to see if you can find that answer within yourself, and we will have time to dive into it deeper in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Or why don't you start off our golden nugget? Give us a golden nugget that you got today, as hard as it may be, and then you can.
It's hard for me because it's very abstract. Because it's not in my, like, to me, we have an obligation to. I classify this as macro. Things out of our control. We're on this mission. I guess it's in our control to fulfill our mission. That I believe, but this coming back with this, in the three shots, and like, if I'm not making it, it's almost like you're warped into another world, and now if you didn't act reasonably, you presumably have more pain, and you're going through all these things. I mean, the one thing I guess that this all reminds me of is, King David and his repentance, and that he overcame, like, your evil inclinations can end up being big mitzvahs. Like, there's this concept. That's my that's my takeaway, I guess. Yeah, from all of it. Thank you.
You want to pass it on?
Carol.
Thanks, Mark. Well, it was a shorter class than normal, but probably have way more questions than normal too. So I'll keep that little. I guess what bothered me most, or that I had trouble with the most, and you said some people would and some wouldn't, would be those souls that come back for a very short time, let's say a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, because they only had a specific mitzvah or mission to fulfill. It left the whole family and community around them, I'm sure, grieving. But when they went back home to their soul life, did that make it easier for them? Did that elevate them? Did that complete them so that they wouldn't have to come back again for many more lessons? I don't know. I had a hard time with the young person, because we all know those young people that we say, oh my God, they had their whole life ahead of time, and now they're gone. But apparently they completed what they needed to complete it in our realm of thinking. If that might not have been a Jewish person, or that might not have been somebody who believed in reincarnation and this whole process, it's much more devastating. So I was thinking an awful lot about that. You do throw a lot of information at us in a short period of time that requires lots of questions, I think. So thank you. And I will go back and review. Kelsey.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm still processing a lot as well. So if I have to choose a nugget, I did not realize that this has been so sourced. So I was curious where at in Deuteronomy that is. If you said it, I missed it.
It's not in Deuteronomy. It's a commentary called the Alshich on Deuteronomy, but it's the source in Deuteronomy is chapter 7, verse 9 and 10.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. I'm going to continue processing this. Jill?
Thanks, Kelsey. This was a great class. There's a lot in this short period. I think that what's come up for me is that, we're a soul trying to make things better for our soul, but we're interacting with all of these other souls. And so things can get messy. And it brings me to kind of I think they must be my two favorite Sephirah, Chesed and Gevurah, that to know what is your role, what is our own personal role, and what's starting to get enmeshed or too messy with somebody else's, for whatever reason that is. And it made me think of something you said some classes ago, of like, you have to know what's your business, what's God's business, and what's none of your business. And that's just something that goes through my mind. So I had lots of takeaways from this, but I think probably how we interact with others, and that kindness is at the center of our being. I, I like that image, and to remember that whatever it gets filtered through. I'll pass it to Ilana.
Hi. I think you all know I'm not a big believer in the reincarnation part, but I'm just reflecting because I missed last week, but I think a couple of weeks ago, he talked about, what's our purpose in this world, and that our job is to be better each and every day. So really, that's what I hold on to. Who didn't go? Kelsey?
I think Julian didn't go.
Sorry, Julian.
Thank you. So I'm left trying to search for a parallel between the concept of the soul coming back and the link of the soul to its original or root soul, to compare that to currently the idea of the cave of the ancestors. I think it's called Machpelah. Adam, Eve, Abraham, and Sarah all buried there, and so I'm imagining Adam as the first soul, and I suppose Adam and Eve, and then Abraham and Sarah as a later soul. I don't know. I presume they have their own root, or perhaps each patriarch as well. I don't know, but I'm imagining all the souls kind of going back to them eventually in some sort of very large, complicated family tree of some kind. And also, I'm thinking of the idea of the temple, and our prayers are said to go through the temple en route to God. And therefore, I'm looking for this, I'm searching for this parallel between the tracing back the lineage of the reincarnations to tracing back the physical lineage to this cave, and the spiritual idea of prayer as a sort of something also that traces back to a location, and then the spiritual source or destination in this case, in case of prayer, God. I haven't got very far, but that's where I am at the moment.
I want to remind you that we truly are infinite, and any physical representation of the infinite in this world is just a physical representation of the infinite in this world. That's what I'll say about that, but I understand the quandary and I understand the challenge. With that,
Thank you.
I'd like to wish you all a wonderful day. For those of you who are not staying for Talmud, if you're staying for Talmud, we'll start in about 2 minutes.
I have one more thing to say, Rabbi.
Please.
I did not realize, I should have, but I didn't. With as busy as you are, to be able to do as much research that you do, and actual documentation from sources of Zohar and Talmud and Torah, to be able to bring us this information. Excuse me, because if you brought a person into this class who had not been here from day one, they'd say, that's a bunch of poppycock. It's like, where is he getting all this information from? This is a boogie mindset. Believe it if you want, don't believe it if you want. But the fact that it has real roots somewhere, our beliefs are all just a little bit different because we're all unique. But I want to thank you personally for the research that you do for us. It's a lot. It's a lot. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's really for me, it's a labor of love, and I will tell you this, and I try to be very balanced in the way that I present it, but everything that I present, if someone asked me, where'd you get that from? I'll have in my notes an actual source for it. None of it is my own. It's all sourced deep within tradition. Majority of it's from thousands of years ago, from various commentaries, from various ideas. But that I try very hard to not come up with my own ideas and just, say, okay, like you said, this is just, hokey pokey or whatever you want to call it, but that it's actually rooted deeply in tradition. Whether you want to believe it or not, that's your choice. But at least for me, as a teacher of Judaism and of Torah and of Kabbalah, I want to make sure that at least what I'm saying is deeply rooted. So I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that also in one of your podcasts? Because I know Jill had mentioned that she listened to the podcast too, that you would call Simsum. So you have gotten all this giant information and had to condense it so that you don't break our vessel,
Yes.
knowing our limitations of
And I
knowledge.
believe anyone who's sharing anything ever has to be mitzamtzem it, from the word simsum, has to contract it into some kind of package it somehow in a way that it could be understood, even though it's hard sometimes, especially with these theoretical ideas. Sometimes it's easier than others, but this particular one was a little harder than the average. But yes, we have to mitzamtzem it. We have to be able to create that simsum. Great Kabbalistic analogy there. 2 points for Cheryl.
Thank you. I
Thank
second
you.
Cheryl's idea. And you must not sleep. That's what I was thinking. You just don't sleep at all, Rabbi.
Right,
So,
right.
all right. Have a
Thank
good day,
you.
everybody.
Live your
Have a good
life with
week.
wonder and curiosity, and sleep won't be necessary.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
good day. Bye.